All right, how's everybody doing tonight? John and I are just gonna talk a little bit about Token. That's why I put Token in the thumbnail, and I figured we'd do that since I finished the books, and so we'll just have a little bit. Well, my Saturday video is kind of about Token, halfway about Token anyway. So I figured that's what we do for the week. Next week we'll be on John's channel. We're gonna try to stream both here and there. John, give me a second, will you? You just talk for a second. I got something up from my computer.
Sure. So first off, Vaz says 2 weeks in a row where John didn't have to work till 11 p.m. Yeah, it's one thing that there's nothing so permanent as a temporary job in my profession, and there's nothing so temporary as a permanent, if that makes sense. But they budgeted it out for us to work the middle shift until the end of February, and then because of the holidays, they pulled it out from us. I don't particularly care, but guys made arrangements to work the middle shift with their wives and babysitters and whatever they have to do, and they were livid. I don't have kids, so I just work. But so I went back. The only problem is you just have to change your sleep schedule. So I am back waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, getting to work at 6, and coming home at whatever time that is, leaving the job at 2:30. But rumor has it that in February they're going to go back to the night shift, but it's not going to be the middle shift. It'll be going in at midnight, which doesn't bother me at all because I look at it as I sleep. I go to bed at 10 o'clock at the latest, wake up at 4, or I go to work at midnight. You know what I mean? So I leave for work at 10. It's just switching work for sleep. So that doesn't bother me. Plus, it's a lot more money. So I'll take that shift if it is offered to me. But yes, so the middle, either way, I will be able to stream normal if the rumors are true.
Sounds good. I just want to let everybody know, especially you, John, if I, for some reason, disappear, it's because I need a new computer. And I just use my laptop, right? And it's not charging correctly, and my cord is not being recognized all the time.
Oh, no.
Sometimes it just drains the battery really quickly. So I'm waiting till the new year to get a new computer. That way I can put it on next year's expenses. So
okay. Do you get signal? Like, do you have a cell phone, or I picture you just having a landline?
No, I get Starlink. Me and Elon are like this.
I picture you with one of those Addams Family phones where you got to dial and talk to an operator.
No. Well, I didn't even want power in this place, but that was a while ago. That was about 15 years ago. We got power, we got internet, we got pretty much everything now. But
Yeah, so my wife wants to move. She keeps saying like Alaska, and I'm like, that's a little too far away because then nobody will visit. But I don't particularly care. Like we were joking. It's like RJ says there's like abandoned houses by him. We'll sneak into one. I don't really care where I live as long as I want no natural disasters. I want no tax on my pension, and I want internet and electricity. Like as long as the neighbors leave me alone, I'm fine wherever I live. I'll make friends, and if not, I can still do the internet stuff, make comics. So maybe I'll live next door to you. Is there a good?
Hey, a funny story about that. I don't know if I told the story or not before, but. A friend of mine, the guy who has the ranch, so he was telling me because I'm always on the lookout for basically fruit to fill up my freezer with. So he said, RJ, if you want a rhubarb, he said, go down to this farm. He owned the farm. He just bought it so that he could have the land, but no one lives in the house. They hadn't lived in the house for like 20 years. It was all falling in and all this kind of stuff. Like the porch is just caved in on itself and everything else like that, and most of the windows are gone, all that kind of stuff. So I went out and I got a bunch of rhubarb, enough for me to fill up my freezer for the winter, and I thought I'd go take a look at the house, and I knew it wasn't a good idea because it's so rickety. But I walked in through the caved in porch and then into the parlor, and then I just took a couple of steps back because it looked like someone had ripped apart part of the house and created a very small room in the corner of the house, this abandoned rickety old house, no power, no electricity, no running water or anything like that, and was living in it. And I'm thinking to myself, just back away slowly.
Yeah. So you walked in on a squatter.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. I did that in Albuquerque. I drove to a friend's house, and this is when we were in college. So like every semester, everybody would move. I'm sure you remember college days. Some guys would live in the dorm, some guys would live in a house. Then they fight with their roommates. They move someplace else. So I went to my buddy's house where he used to live, opened up the door, just walked in. And there's no black people in New Mexico. The racism in Mexico is white versus Indians, Indians versus white. But I walked into the only black family in New Mexico's house. So they just like looked at me. I'm a white guy walking in. They were all watching TV, the whole family. I was like, wrong house, sorry. And this is New Mexico. Everybody has guns. I just, like Homer Simpson walking out through the bushes. And I was like, hey, Cody, you didn't tell me you moved. He's like, you didn't ask.
Yes, well, when I made this place here that I live in, so here's my segue into Tolkien. When I made this place that I live in now, because I always say my brother and I actually built this place. I tried to make it half a Roman house, half of a house you'd find in the Shire. So I never quite got there. I mean, I got like a sod roof and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of looks a little bit like a hobbit hole, but not as much as I would like.
Oh, okay. So would you say like a Roman house? Is it like U-shaped? Did you have like a central patio? What do they call it? Like a forum, I guess?
That's what I was going for. And I was going to enclose the backyard. So I could do that kind of thing, like put a wall around the backyard and have it enclosed like that in a Roman way. But I never got around to doing that. I might actually do it. I'm kind of building a greenhouse that's about 15 feet away from my let's say northwest corner right now. And I may connect the let's say, I don't know, alcove that I have with that through a walkway, which is covered in. So it may become something like that after a while, but God only knows. I just make things. I just connect things together. It's like I made the house and then I decided to build a greenhouse next to it. And then I built a 16 by 16 2-story building next to that, which, has all my comics in it and all that kind of stuff. So I don't have any, I was going to hollow out a hill and make a cold storage, but never got around to that either.
Did you get my comic?
I did not. I checked the mail yesterday specifically so that I could see if I got it, and it did not come yet.
It's really weird because I'm going down pirate ship right now, and I don't see any of the Canadian orders listed. What's going on? Like I printed them, but I'm on a different computer, and I think sometimes there's a problem. I think if I went on my laptop where I actually printed it, it would show up.
Just let everybody know, if anybody's new here or watching this later, the link for John's book, which is the second trailer that you saw, is in the description of this video, and mine is Fade to Blue. Those are the two trailers, and they're, again, both linked in the description if you want to know where you can find those. John's is published, and you will get his when he gets to the order. Mine is still in the works. We're just doing they signed a page for it now.
Yeah, so I think I only have about 35 left to do it. I could get it done this weekend. So I'm hoping to be done. I know I promised last weekend, but I'm sorry. And I was homesick yesterday and today, just like a flu, just kicked my butt.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm going in tomorrow, as you can tell. But yesterday I woke up, I was like, blah, 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 it was
like 40 degrees today. Today will be a good day to work.
Yeah. I very rarely get sick, and when I do, I turn into a baby. And a little more information than anybody needs to know. The only place to get anything to eat is a McDonald's right next to us. And if you have the app, you can get a 99-cent coffee. And I don't care what anybody says, McDonald's coffee is good. So every day at lunchtime, I get a 99-cent coffee. Unfortunately, that comes with 2 cheeseburgers and French fries.
I'm sure unfortunate for you, John.
So I've been eating 2 cheeseburgers, French fries, plus whatever my wife packs for me for lunch. She wakes up with me and makes my lunch in the morning when I'm getting ready. So I've been eating like a pig, and I weighed myself this morning. I'm down another 10 pounds. So I don't know.
Gotta get that second breakfast in.
French fry diet, I guess. So that's all the interesting stuff about me. You want to talk about Tolkien?
Yeah. So you did watch I know you commented on my video on Saturday. Right. What do you think of my premise to begin with, anyways? That one of the main themes of Tolkien is just the beauty of his language and that words have power.
Absolutely. I think Tolkien doesn't get enough credit. Like people like that meme that you always see, like, oh, you don't like me describing this tree for 16 pages? Well, I'm going to describe it more. That's not true. That's Lovecraft, especially the Mountains of Madness. 60 pages describing the basalt rock formations is maddening. But Tolkien is beautiful with his language. to the point like it's tear jerking. Anybody who says that really hasn't tried. Now it's not easy, and like you, I skipped all the poems and the songs the first 2 times I read any Tolkien, and now I can't. I have to read everything. I skipped all of Tom Bombadil. Just that rhyming stuff was getting on my nerves. But now I read everything, and I think it's so good. So like everybody has a favorite Tolkien quote. There is evil in this world, but there's so much good. I'm murdering it because I didn't realize we were talking about Tolkien. But I do think he has beautiful language, and he uses the exact words. The guy invented, almost 3. I don't know if he invented the full Dwarven language, but he invented 2 Elven languages, the Sylvan language and the I forget what he calls I forget what he calls the second Elven language, Sindarian. Did I say that? Yeah, the Sindarian, and I forget the other one. Those are the 2 Elven languages, and then translated everything back and forth. So he was what was his exact discipline? He wrote the Oxford Dictionary, so this guy knew words.
There's a linguist.
Yeah. Well, what was his actual discipline? What did he actually teach? It's
that's a good one. I don't know that off the top of my head.
I'll look it up on the internet right now. But Tony Grigo says, if you like Tolkien, you should check out Lord Dunsany. Yeah, it's funny because I read Lord Dunsany because the Lovecraft kept mentioning him. I bought all of these collections of the Arkham Press Arkham Press letters from Lovecraft, and he kept mentioning Lord Dunsany. So I got his books too. I didn't realize that it was also Tolkien that was inspired by that stuff. But that's like what, an Irish fantasy author that predates both of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That one I don't know. So one of the things I love going to YouTube, and I've watched so many Tolkien things by now that it just recommends them off like a whole bar of them, about 20 down. But one of the things I find about it is that there's not really a community per se, I think, for Tolkien. He's just too big. It's just so many people. I mean, it's not like comics. I mean, comics is entire genre, really, but Tolkien is bigger than that. I mean, you got people making videos about all different kinds of things, and I love to watch, and it always brings up a lot of different perspectives with different people talking about the way they see the books. One of the interesting ones that I saw was about his language, and how the guy was saying that the first the first book of the first book of the first volume and the second book of the first volume, so that's the first half, and then the second half of Fellowship of the Rings has such a tonal shift in it, because in his way of thinking about it, since it's a found manuscript, the first half, with Tom Bombadil and all that kind of stuff, was all stuff that was rewritten by Bilbo, whereas the second half was stuff that was rewritten by Frodo.
Right. Yeah. There's a whole fake authorship. I forget who it is, but supposedly, like, the Silmarillion was written by Ruel, an elf in Valinor, who gave the books to somebody who crossed over, and then they were written by another elf that lived in I think Gondolin, and then that book escaped and went to. So there's all there's like 5 books of the Silmarillion. They were written by 5 different elves. And then, like you said, Bilbo and Frodo, Sam, and I think Pippin. I forget which one, Merry or Pippin, wrote the last couple of pages.
I think it's Merry, because actually, what I'm reading the appendices now, and to me, it's not only interesting because of the backstory that it gives, but what I picture in my mind is basically Aragorn telling, well, for the first appendices, anyways, telling the whole history of Gondor and the Dunedain and all that kind of stuff to Merry, as he's recording it, because he did record some of that stuff from Gondor.
Oh yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, and then Sam gave the book to his daughter Eleanor, who brought it to Gondor, and then there was a Gondorian who finalized it in its final form. But I love all that, and then supposedly there was a person who found it in England who brought it to Tolkien. That's that. That's the nature of the book. But I love all that. We just pretend, that it was a found book, but that's what do they call that? Kayfabe. That's like the Lovecraft. It's kayfabe that it's all real and he's just collecting information. I love all that stuff. I love going along with the kayfabe of that.
Okay, let me bring out random questions for you here for Tolkien questions.
Okay.
So, in your estimation, what is Bjorn?
Bjorn is a skin changer. He's the guy that turns into bears. Now he's a human, so but there is a soft magic system in Tolkien, and Sauron created werewolves, and when Sauron Tolkien's werewolves were different than what we consider werewolves. Werewolves are regular wolves, but basically they're force-fed evil spirits. Now, what are the evil spirits? I could go on and on and on for this, but if you make an oath in Middle Earth, you are bound to Middle Earth until the oath is fulfilled. That's what happened to the dead men of Dunharrow. And what's his name? Beren. Beren's men were bound by an oath. It's a lesser story of the Silmarillion. So there's people that took it, so their spirits still wander Middle Earth, and Sauron would capture these. And then sometimes Sauron would force people to make oaths or steal their souls and then force them into werewolves, and that would turn them into sentient, monstrous beings like I can't think of his name now. The one that Char cracks or something like that, the one that bit off Beren's hand. But I always imagined, and I don't know because I looked this up himself, how did he get this power? Is it a spirit of bears that he stole? Like all magic in Tolkien that doesn't come from Valinor is kind of evil, necromancy kind of magic. So I don't know. Did he make a deal with spirits? But it's not explained. And then he goes and transfers, he has the Bjornlings, which become like, they're not as powerful as him, but there's a whole tribe of werebears. So my answer is, I don't know. It's all speculation.
Well, you did bring up another point that I want to touch on, which is really good, is the fact that it's very Celtic in the way that he treats language, which I talked about last Saturday. He treats language and oaths, because that's one of the things, if you read, again, Celtic mythology, I always used to tell my boys, never make a promise that you can't keep or that you're not willing to die for. It's basically, that's Celtic mythology. You see some guy, he's riding down on a horse down the road, and he sees a woman, and she makes him make an oath to him because she's crying or something like that, and then his entire life is destroyed trying to fulfill this oath, because there's no other thing to do but fulfill the oath. He has to, or it's called, the translation is usually he's put under bonds. So he bounds himself to his word, or by his word, to this person. And it goes into the Arthurian myth as well, because like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight also has things like that. But the Arthurian way of actually dealing with it, much more, say, Christianized way, was I think it was Sir Gawain that said, when he actually had this happen to him, he came upon this woman on the side of the road. He said, "Woman, I will do anything for you if it will not harm my honor." Now that to myself, there's a good caveat for you.
Yeah.
But speaking of Bjorn, as far as I know from the letters and stuff like that, well, he's the only one of his kind when he's there, besides, the Bjornlings. But he's a man, yes, but it's not really magic. I mean, it's got to be some kind of, I don't know, but he took his inspiration from the Viking myths, because he did the Beowulf and stuff like that. So the Viking myths were where you got berserkers and things that would put on the skins of bears. So it has something to do with that, except for the fact that he actually transforms into a bear instead of transforming with the spirit of a bear into a berserker.
Yeah, a lot of what we call magic is just part of the. How did you like it, Jewel? Did you like it? That's my comic. For those of you who don't know who I am, Heroic Tales. You can still get it. The link is like the first post in this comments. But the magic in Tolkien is just the natural way the world works. Like a lot of the like the Vial of Galadriel and stuff like that. Is that really that's just like the elves, they wouldn't consider it magic. It's just part of nature to them. Like you don't see it in the movies, but Aragorn does a lot of magic in the book, like his healing. He it could be said that he's telepathic. He could foresee things. You know, like yeah, you could run it up like that. He's a good ranger and he could track, but he has some sort of precognition. But they never think of him as a wizard or anything like that. It's just he just understands how to use nature. Um, so I think like Bjorn is the same way. He just manipulated nature. I don't know. I now I want to go into a deep dive of Bjorn.
I always one of the things that strikes me, because I kind of forgot about it after watching the movies, and it's been so long since I read the books, is basically the far side of Faramir, which is not even touched on in the movies, right? So that would be the similar kind of thing. I think Faramir has far sight so that he can not quite see into the future, but at the very least, well, he has the dreams, but besides that, he has some kind of light precognition. We'll say very, very light, but enough so that he would make himself a much better steward than either his brother or his father.
Faramir is a character that just doesn't get his due but Tolkien himself, they asked him, "Who are you?" Like in the book, "Who's your self-insert?" And he said Faramir. You know, and then Faramir has that great line, "I do not love the sword for its sharpness, but for its ability to defend." You know, and Faramir wanted to be a scholar. When he was a little kid, he took to books and reading. And then whenever Gandalf came to Gondor, he would go to Faramir, and Faramir would be a little kid and he would teach him things. And Faramir knew Gandalf's real name was Olorian, and he came from Valinor. And then what's his name? Denethor would see this, and he's like, "You're turning my son into a weakling. We don't need scholars. Like right over there is Mordor. We need warriors." You know, so that's why one of the reasons why Denethor resented was Gandalf. And then Faramir did his duty, but he would have been like a Marcus Aurelius, you know, the scholar king. I like Faramir. They made him look a little bit more sinister in the movies than he needed, but it worked. Yeah.
So what was my other point that I was going to bring up? There was something about I can't remember right at the moment. I lost it while you were talking. But yeah, I love Faramir as well. He doesn't get his due in the movies whatsoever. If you ask me, great actor, I must admit, that played Faramir in the movies. But
yeah, it's funny because I can't picture anybody else playing those characters now. You know, like Sean Bean is Boromir. Even though for the longest time he was that Viking-looking brute from the Ralph Bakshi cartoon. But, you know, and then when I saw him in the movie, I was like, that's not Boromir. Now it's the other way around. If I see the Ralph Bakshi cartoon, I'm like, that's not Boromir. It's Sean Bean. That movie was one of the most perfectly cast movies ever.
Agreed.
You know, that's, what's her name? Kate Blanchett as Galadriel. It was so perfect. Because Galadriel is like, Kate Blanchett, I think she's beautiful, but she's not like classically beautiful. There's something like elven about her appearance, so it just works so well. And Elrond, that's exactly what Elrond looked like in the book: white skin, long, straight black hair. You know, he was perfect.
All right, so let's skip around here.
Sure.
Here's the other thing that I was thinking since I finished is like, again, you forget these things, or I forgot them anyways, because like I said in my video, I was like probably 13 when I picked these books up for the first time, and then haven't really touched them until this last year. But you had the movies in between. But the thing is that I hit the Destruction of the Ring in the book, and then I'm thinking to myself, oh yeah, I still got another 7 chapters left, right? And it's the Scourging of the Shire that is the actual climax of the book,
right?
And you just don't even touch on any of that in the movies. So right. People who just watch the movies are missing like the point of the entire book.
It is so good, and it's so exciting, and it's so satisfying to see the hobbits just come into their own and like cowboys and just clear out the gangs out of town.
Which is funny because again, in the meantime, I had exposure to halflings through D&D, and you get them as thieves and rogues and all these kinds of things, right? And you do get a little bit of that at the first of the book, where they can walk silently and disappear if they want to, but you don't really get that until the Scourging of the Shire. You don't get where D&D actually pulled this from until you get to that point. It's like, okay, now I
I thought
understand.
the whole sneaking was he was a burglar in The Hobbit. You know what I mean? So like sneaking around and look at all the stuff Bilbo did in The Hobbit. That was all D&D sneaky stuff. Because to
Yeah,
me,
but besides that, they have natural abilities to disappear in the woods and stuff like that.
yeah, I always thought The Hobbit was more D&D than Lord of the Rings. Like I don't know, Lord of the Rings is just there's no other book like it. There's no other book written like it. It like breaks all the rules of fiction, but yet it works. Like I was just arguing with the guy on Twitter about why didn't they just fly the eagles into Mordor? And his answer is because that would have ruined the story. I'm like, no, that I don't argue with him. What I was trying to explain, I said, first off, according to which version of Tolkien's letters, the eagles are Maya, or they're a special type of animal. So if they're Maya, you don't want them anywhere near the ring. You know what I mean? But each eagle has a 55-meter wingspan. So their wingspan is almost or even more than half of a football field. So to have 9 of these eagles flying into Mordor, they're going to be seen. And the guy goes, well, how does a medieval society see these eagles flying? I said, yeah, for Sauron to see these eagles, you would have to actually think that it was like a made-up land with an evil wizard or something. Like, how could you not think that Sauron's going to see? So the only reason why Frodo and Bilbo snuck in is because Aragorn distracted Sauron. That was it. Otherwise, Sauron, like the Nazgul, everybody was looking at Sauron. I mean, Aragorn. I didn't get this for like 3 readings, but I finally picked it up when, Saruman told Sauron that a hobbit had the ring. He knew that a hobbit had the ring, Baggins Shire. So he was looking for a hobbit. And then Pippin picked up the Palantir. Sauron didn't know who he was. He saw a hobbit. And then Aragorn picks up the Palantir and declares himself. Sauron thinks that he either has the ring or he's about to take the ring from the hobbit who has the ring. Sauron doesn't care about anything else but getting that ring. He drops all his defenses, laser focuses on Aragorn because that ring would make it so that it would be taken and used as power. And he knew that and that's what Aragorn was betting on. He went to the Morannon. He was outnumbered 10-1. He basically told everybody, we're going to go die. Unless Frodo succeeds, we're going to go die. But this is the only chance we got, and he goes with an inferior force. Sauron's troops all zoom in there. And meanwhile, Bilbo and Frodo they sneak by. If the eagles had went by, Sauron would have still been looking everywhere and everywhere. They wouldn't have been focused. The Nazgul would have been flying here. He would have spotted, hey, what are these eagles doing in the sky? You don't think he would see 9 giant football field stadium-sized eagles flying in the air? And that's it. They could have still succeeded, but I doubt it. That's why all the powerful Gandalf was the only powerful being that was in the Fellowship. Glorfindel didn't go. Gladriel didn't go. Celeborn didn't go. Elrond, because they could be detected. What's his name? Glorfindel shines in both worlds, so it would have been like too obvious. So that, so they had to. That was it. They didn't use the eagles because it would have been for a couple of reasons. Also, the other reason is the eagles are agents of Manwë, and they can't. They're not under Gandalf's command. And the fourth reason is this is the age of men. Like, the elves and the dwarves, except for Gimli and Legolas, they were the only elves. Never mind Helm's Deep. That's that book. The elves didn't show up in Helm's Deep. But this was the men. This was the time for the men to stand up and fight. Yes, the elves fought defensive wars so that they wouldn't be killed, so that they could leave. And the dwarves, they didn't really partake in these battles. So there's all the reasons why they didn't take the elves, take the eagles.
One of the things I was thinking, well, I live out in the country, in the middle of nowhere. So if I'm outside for any amount of time, I usually see 1 to 2 eagles a day, but they never pass by. There's something that catches your eye when an eagle goes by, and that's just a normal sized eagle that goes through
Right.
the sky. It's like I literally look up almost once a day and go, eagle of the day. There's the eagle of the day. He's flying by, right? And it's not the same one. And I mean, because I usually do it. I do it in my car. I do it from in the backyard. I do it from out in the woods. Stuff like that. So yeah, eagles are something that when they're noticeable when they're going through the sky.
Right. They would have been spotted. If they were Maya on themselves, do you really want them to be near the rings? And but either way, they work for Monway, so it's not like Gandalf could just command them. When Monway said, "This is for the humans to do," Gandalf just go there and guide them. Otherwise, one of the things that they said to do was give the eagles the ring and fly it to Valador, and they were like, "No, we don't want to deal with it." This was for humans. What do you?
Tony's asking whether or not we like the film Wizards or his Tolkien. I don't particularly like Wizards. Bakshi's Tolkien. Again, I really like the older. I think it's an older one. The Hobbit version of it, that was really good. Bakshi's is not so much. Mainly because of Aragorn. The way he portrays Aragorn, I don't particularly like. The rest is pretty good though.
I liked it. The Hobbit, the bench back in what is it, back in Arras or wherever you say the Baskin and Arras. That was my first exposure to the Hobbit, so I loved it. I watched. Now I gotta. I watch it over and over again. And that Batchkey cartoon, I freaking loved it. I didn't read any of the books then, so then once I started reading the books, I didn't like it less because I was a kid when I saw it. But it just bothers me that they just like ended the story, like right in the middle of the story. He just ran out of money, and then they went back to back Rankin and Bass, and then they finished it with where there's a whip, there's a way.
Yeah. I remember. So where you're saying that you see each of those actors from Lord of the Rings when you read it now, that version of Gollum from the original cartoon for The Hobbit, that even though the version of Gollum in the movies is really good, I still see Gollum when I read, as the Toad from the original cartoon, because I taped that off of the television with our VHS player and just watched it like once every 6 months, once a year, something like that.
I was 15 years old and I was camping with my friends, and there was this girl there that I met, and she was older. She was 18. So I'm 15, she's 18, and she was so pretty. And they had like a wooden screen, and they just projected The Hobbit on. And I was so excited. I was like, we're going to watch The Hobbit. We're going to watch The Hobbit. We're in the woods for a week. This is like the only TV we could get. This is like, the 70s. So we lay down on a blanket. She lay down next to me, and we're watching The Hobbit. And through the whole thing, she keeps going, let's go somewhere. Let's go. And I'm like, where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? Eventually got up and left, and I'm watching The Hobbit. And then afterwards, my friend was like, what are you, an idiot? So there you go. I got blocked by The Hobbit and my own stupidity.
So, okay, I'll jump around again. I take it from what you said a little while ago, you weren't particularly fond of Tom Bombadil.
No, I love Tom Bombadil now, but the first time I read it, I couldn't deal with it, but now he's one of my favorite characters. I actually wrote a paper about him in college. I grew to like Tom Bombadil. He's one of my favorite characters. But the first time I read it, I couldn't stand him. He's an acquired taste, I guess.
I guess that, remember I was saying last week on your channel, we were talking, I was saying there was elements in it that I just couldn't, when I first read it, couldn't put together in my head. And I couldn't remember what it was. It was Tom Bombadil and Aragorn existing in the same world. To me, they were just so opposite of each other. They should believe, or they should exist in basically different mythology systems, right? But the whole thing about Tom Bombadil is to my mind, anyways, this is the way I think about it. He's basically said to exist before the world, and that's because Tolkien created stories about Tom Bombadil before the world of Lord of the Rings actually existed.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. I never thought of it that way. Because one of my favorite fan theories is that it's Tolkien himself and his wife that live in, he inserted himself into the story. You know, other people say that he is the harmony of the music of the Ainur, whereas Ungoliant is the dissonance. Like he's the embodiment of the harm, but he's a local spirit. Like he can't leave that area. He they even said that he's like ultimately powerful within his realm, but eventually he would fall to Sauron because Sauron would come and corrupt the world around him. After a while, that he would lose his power and be defeated. So at first I thought he was this godlike being that just liked it there, but he's like a local, what do the Romans called that, like a local genius, local, just a like a minor deity just located in that particular area.
That's exactly the way I see it. It's either Greek or Roman. And I think to myself, that's the only section that really has a touch of Greek or Roman mythology in it. Because when, what's his wife's name? Oh, yes. When she first appeared, I was like, oh, that's a Naiad. That's what it is. It's a Greek Naiad. But right. You don't see that kind of Greek or Roman source mythology anywhere else in Lord of the Rings, if you ask me.
Genus Loki is what Zach Dan says. Yeah, that's what he is. He's like and what is Goldberry? She's just a spirit. Like I always figured she was just like a minor Maya, and Tom Bombadil is just the exception. Like Ungoliant, we're never going to know what they are. I don't know, because he says he was there with the first raindrop. He always existed, but yet in the Silmarillion, when Morgoth was literally turning the surface of the earth into lava and everything like that, where was he? So was he hiding? Was he buried in the lava? I think about things like that. Was he like in spirit form and it didn't coalesce until the earth cooled? I would love to ask Tolkien that kind of stuff.
That's one of the things I'm actually going to start doing, which I never. One of the things I don't click on usually is Tolkien interviews. Is like I like to. Well, I didn't want to do it while I was reading the books because I didn't want to have any sway one or the other about some of the things that are going on. I just wanted to read it. But now that I'm done and just reading the appendices, I've got to go back and watch Tolkien interviews to get his idea. And I do have the book of letters that he wrote. So it's probably about 10 feet away from me right now, which I only skimmed a little bit, and that was it.
I don't have that. I got to get that. That's the only thing by Tolkien I haven't read. I think I got the Unfinished Tales, the Children of Húrin. Talk about a sad story, the Children of Húrin. Oh my God. But my favorite Tolkien character out of all is Turin Tarambar. Basically the precursor to Elric of Melniboné. He had the evil black sword. He wore the dragon helm. He was the greatest fighter. And then supposedly at the end of time, the Daggerath, he will show up and slay Morgoth. That's just awesome stuff.
Tony says, John, RJ, how would you think that Kull or Conan could fare in Middle Earth? Well, he's just a barbarian, so he'd probably be like an Easterling almost.
Yeah, he would have to be out in the east. Maybe the Blue Wizards would inspire him to fight against Sauron. The whole east, with the exception of the area where the stories take place, was under Sauron's control. And the Blue Wizards, Palandro and something Palandro and something went out there, and supposedly they created such a disruption that Sauron wasn't able to rally the forces as much as he wanted to defeat. So they were heroes in their own right, but then they succumbed to evil secret cults. And supposedly the book that Tolkien was working on and then he abandoned was called The New Shadow. And it was during the reign of Aragorn's son. And one of the stars was going to be, do you remember Pippin made a friend with Beregond?
Yes.
If Beregond's son is an old man, and he's warning because they say that like little children dress up as orcs on the equivalent of Halloween and scare each other because they don't believe him anymore because they haven't seen him. And he's one of the few people who'd be like, "Don't do that. Orcs are real. They can still come back." And they're like, whatever, And now so I think that the bad guys in that story were going to be the Blue Wizards, but I can't prove that.
I think it's really funny because, again, to my mind, someone was arguing with me about this in my comments. I again, the way that the movies portray the orcs is not correct. If you ask me, it's good. I mean, it works well for the movies, but when I read the books, it's more, they're basically World War I Germans. They're like, I want your number. They're going to march you until you die because they're corrupted, and they're basically corrupted Europeans, right? Because they're corrupted elves. Whereas the Easterlings are most definitely like Turkish soldiers and things like that, that he would have encountered within World War I. It's soldiers from the East, right?
Yeah. And I did like in the movies that the original orcs were smaller, but then the Uruk-hai were bigger. That was pretty well described. Like, we don't think of it, but the original orcs were smaller than humans. Not as small as dwarves, but that's what goblins were, older orcs that were really small. I thought the detail to the Peter Jackson films was really good. There's a few things I disagree with, like the elves shouldn't have showed up at Helm's Deep. That just bothers me. I understand why they took out Glorfindel and replaced her with Arwen. It makes sense in a movie, but like, she had enough that they could have given her. But what she did was basically she was a handmaiden to Aragorn. She made for him the banner and brought to him the forged sword and everything like that. You know what I mean? But I guess they wanted a girl boss her. But introducing a great character like Glorfindel for only like 2 seconds of the movie, I don't know. I could see the masses being a little confused. I understand why they dropped out Tom Bombadil, but but they should have had the Barrow Wights. Zombies.
Oh, I agree.
They should have zombies, and then they find the swords.
Problem is, usually you can't really do the Barrow Wights without doing Tom Bombadil.
Right.
And supposedly they did a movie script for it while Tolkien was alive, and they tried to put Bombadil in it, and he said, "No, that's not it at all. Just take that out."
Right. There was supposedly the Beatles were working on a Lord of the Rings movie, and Tolkien was like, "Please, no." And supposedly, the Lord of the, like he said, as long as it's not a cartoon, and they said no. Then it went back and forth, went to another, and it ended up as a cartoon, and he was livid. I think he was embarrassed by the Ralph Bakshi portrayal. Yeah, Chuck Dixon, Charles Dixon has a Hobbit comic that he says still sells. He still says he gets like 4-digit residual checks every year from the sales of that. It's in every language. And what it is there's a first draft of the Hobbit that's not completely different, but very different than the Hobbit that we all know. And that's in the Library of Congress, and the copyright went out on that particular book. So they made a comic book based on that, and the Tolkien estate said that they didn't want him to do it. So basically, Eclipse Comics basically said, "We're going to do it with your permission or not your permission. Do you want your cut or no?" And they were like, "All right." So it's kind of just like a shady thing at the beginning of Chuck Dixon's career that they did, and he still gets paid for it.
Oh, it's beautiful art, though. I mean, that's, with all due respect to Chuck, I think it's the art that keeps it going.
He said it was one of the hardest things to adapt. He goes, "How do you adapt Tolkien into a comic?" I got to pick it up. I don't have it.
I think John already answered this question. He thinks that Erica Melbourne is basically there in the middle of the precursor to Eric Ehrlich is there in Tolkien.
Right. Turin Tarambar actually has an evil black sword that talks to him, and laughs at him at his horrors, So, but it's weird because the Silmarillion came out in like 1973, 74, and the maybe even later. But Elric of Melniboné came out in the late 60s. So, but Tolkien wrote the Silmarillion 30 years prior. So it's really weird. Is it one of those coincidences like the X-Men and the Doom Patrol? You know what I mean? It's kind of fascinating. Or are they both inspired by her earlier myth, which is probably more likely something that I don't know.
Let's see. I'm just scrolling through some of
Tom
these
DeLuise
comments.
as Tom Bombadil. That would have been good.
Tom DeLuise.
That would have been good.
That's funny. Yeah, I really think the Barrow writes. Well, I'm reading the Appendices A right now, and it's talking about the Witch King of Angmar and the war with the Dunedain and all that kind of stuff.
Such a fascinating story. That deserves a movie.
Yeah, I mean, they're working on the story of Gollum right now, supposedly, where Gandalf and Aragorn hunt him down, and that's what they want to put out for a movie. But to me, you go back, you could do an entire other trilogy with the War of the Dunedain and Witch King of Angmar and everything like that.
Right. It bothers me. Like I didn't go see the Hera Holdenhelm, the Ride of the Rohirrim cartoon. I'm like, why make up a character when first off, Helm Hammerhand is one of the greatest characters in Tolkien. This is a guy who built the Helm's Deep. He would go out. They were being sieged by the Dunlandings, and the Dunlanding stories. I could go on and on. I could go on many tangents as you want, but they had a legit complaint. But whatever. Greed gets in the way, whatever. So they're fighting the Rohirrim. They're sieged up, and then at night when everybody was sleeping, Helm Hammerhand would go out and beat people to death with his fists. He would blow the horn and scare he would let them know he was coming, and then beat soldiers to death with his fists. And then one day he didn't come back, and they found him just frozen to death, standing there like this. So let's make a movie about his daughter that doesn't exist. That was a movie right there. So I refuse to see that stuff. And then all of the stories, like you said, the Witch King of Angmar, the whole downfall of Arthedain in those kingdoms. The fall of Gondolin is a story. The rise and fall of Feanor is a story. The Beridan Luthien is the greatest story. You could do a whole story about the sailing prince of Numenor. There's so many stories in Tolkien. The Children of Hurin, if you want to just depress the hell out of your entire audience. All of these stories are great stories. I think a story of Beren before he even meets Luthien, just him and the bandits going around. Morgoth, it was a band of like 12 humans went around causing so much problems that Morgoth was hiring mercenaries to kill him. That's great. And then he goes off and steals a Cimmeral.
I always get confused because to me, I always pronounce his name in my head like it was a Celtic name. So instead of, but you put it as Baron, so it'd be BER, whereas I put it as Boreen because for Celtic it would be BE and then RUN with the accoutrement on it.
Yeah, well,
anyway.
BEREN, so I always say Baron.
Yeah, I think you're more righter than I am. Although one of the things that I have to do, because I do have a copy of it somewhere, I have to read. I did start reading. I don't think I've ever finished Tolkien's Beowulf.
I never read the Beowulf. I never read any of his non-Middle Earth stuff. So, so I can't comment on that. Yeah, he what was one of the first people to translate Beowulf into English. Oh, and he taught linguistics and Old English and Phil. Oh, of course I lost it. I hit the wrong button. Just I was saying
philology.
Philology. That's it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, he knew Latin very well as well. I don't know if he knew Greek or not off the top of my head, but I don't know how many languages he would have known.
I somebody corrected him. One of his editors corrected him, and he wrote back, "Sir, I know what I'm talking about." He goes, he goes, don't you quote the dictionary to me. I wrote the dictionary. I wonder what he was like. Was he strict? I bet you he was strict but fair.
From the things that I hear about, it's like the fact that I was mentioning this again in my last video. But after the Second Vatican Council, when they introduced vernacular into the Catholic Mass, he refused to use English even when he went to mass, and he still went to mass, but he just used Latin all the time anyways. He just refused to do so. So yes, I would say he was very much probably a strict guy.
Well, I know his parents were killed, and he was raised by a priest, and he fell in love with Edith. Is that his wife's name? He
I
fell
don't
in
know
love
if that
with
man.
Edith. They went out on a date, and they went out into the woods, and she started dancing in the woods, and he said that was the moment he was smitten with her. It's very romantic, and that's what happened in Baron and Luthien.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to say.
Saw Luthien dancing in the woods, and he fell in love. And Goldberry dances in the woods and makes Tom Bombadil happy. That's why I always like that story, that he's Tom Bombadil. But he told the priest that he was going to get married to her, and the priest was like, "She's a Protestant. Don't see that girl." So he listened to her. He listened to the priest. He loved this girl, and the priest told him he can't marry her. And then when he was 21, he was on his own, and he was just like I picture him just sitting there like, "Oh, I'm 21 now," and he ran and he found her. She was about to be married, and he explained, "The priest told me, don't marry this guy. I love you," and she called off the wedding, got married to him. It's kind of a romantic story. And then she converted to Catholicism, and they were happily ever after. The name Edith, yeah, unfortunately, Archie Bunker ruined the name Edith for us all.
That's one of the things I really find difficult, anyways, when I read fantasy, to actually connect to people with names. With Tolkien's is not hard. That's because he's probably a master of words. Like a lot of the time, when I used to read stuff like, let's say, Conan, is like my mind would just gloss over some of these names, and I would have to focus on the description of the people rather than their name in order to keep them straight in my head, because foreign names just don't compute to me most of the time.
Right. That's why I have a problem with some mythologies and not others. That's why the Aztec and Mayan mythology, I'm sorry, guys. Like Oscar is my colorist, and we keep working on a Mayan themed book, and I just can't keep track of everything. And to him, that's easy. That's what he grew up with. But like Celtic, I'm sorry, RJ, I can't follow Celtic. My mother was Irish, and I still can't follow Celtic mythology. Those names are unpronounceable.
There was something. Oh, I was going to say something about Baron. Again, there's so many things to. Every time we bring up something, I got another 5 things coming in my head, and then they leave because no, it doesn't matter. We can talk one thing or another. But I was thinking about a story of Baron. But that again, that is very. If you read the Unfinished Tales, second book of Unfinished Tales, for that story, that's very Celtic as well. The way that it progresses is very Celtic, just because there's not a straight progression of the story itself. It's like a sidetrack of a sidetrack of a sidetrack, and then all of a sudden you're focusing on something else completely different.
So I thought my grandmother was senile, but she was just Celtic the way she told the story. And then we went to the church, and then I saw Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Johnson was telling me about his chicken, and then his chicken wandered into there. And like, Nana, what's the point of the story? Oh, you're just Celtic. Yeah. Jewel asked, was Catholicism even legal in Britain at the time? Yeah, Catholicism was legal because this was the 1900s. It wasn't like it was during the Oliver Cromwell days. Remember, like every other king was Catholic, so there was half the country. Scotland was Catholic, Ireland was Catholic. I don't know about Wales, but half of England. I just wonder now if the King of England is still Anglican. I secretly believe he converted to Islam. My conspiracy theory is Queen Elizabeth held on to dear life, hoping that Charles would die before she would let him be.
I don't think he has many years left in him, considering he's talking about the fact he has cancer now.
Oh, does?
Yeah. Tony says, I read somewhere once that many people think Sauron was a stand-in for Hitler. It could be very much, because it's very much about his spirit, right? And I don't know, because he's basing it a lot more in World War I. I don't know if it's I think that Hitler would be more an embodiment of the spirit that he was trying to talk about with Sauron more than anything else, if you're going to go in that direction. Not that it was Hitler himself, but it is like a German spirit, which you see in the whole um, fouling of the waters in Hobbiton with the creation of the new mill and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, he said he didn't like allegory and he didn't like, a one-to-one correlation, but I don't know. People still interpret it in different ways, but I don't think it was Hitler either. I think it was just like an embodiment of evil. Maybe the great demagogue who could be Hitler, he could be Mussolini, he could be, any Franco, right? It could be anybody. Any of the great demagogues, I guess the great word. Now, Sauron the Red Eye was obviously Japan. Yeah, it could be the Emperor. I think it was just the evil. I read something too that I thought was interesting. In the Unfinished Tales, did you ever read about Morgoth's ring?
I don't know because, like, I mean, I only started rereading them about a year ago, and then I stopped and I decided I'm going to read the entire Lord of the Rings instead.
Well, Sauron poured all of his malice and hatred and whatever cruelty into the ring, and the ring, for lack of a better term, we all know Harry Potter, became like a Horcrux. So it was like a receptacle that he stored his power and then amplified his power. My theory is that everybody leaves Valinor with a bag of power, and every time they use their power, it diminishes. Whereas Sauron thought of a way to keep that power from diminishing. That's what the ring is. That's my theory. I'm probably wrong, but they said that Morgoth, when he came, Morgoth was the original big baddie. Sauron was his lieutenant, and Morgoth, he reshaped the world. He could literally raise mountains and create oceans and break continents and things like that. But as he went, he got less and less powerful, to the point where he got stabbed in the foot and he lived for the rest of his life and things like that. But Tolkien said that he created the whole world of Arda was embedded with his power. He said the whole world was marred with the stain of Morgoth. His power was permeated in everything except water. Water was still pure. That's why Morgoth couldn't cross the seas and stuff like that. So when he was gone, he was literally chained up and thrown into outer space. Sauron was left, and Sauron knew all of his secrets. And the reason why Sauron was so powerful is since the whole world was tainted with the power of Morgoth, he could tap into that power, which is, because he's a Maya. He's one of the lesser spirits of Valinor. He's the same level as Gandalf, as Saruman, but he's more powerful because, first off, I think his power didn't diminish because of the ring, and second off, because he could tap into the ambient power of Morgoth, which is how he could defeat Tom Bombadil, if you ask me, because even Tom Bombadil's land is marred by Morgoth. That's my theories.
I find, well, let's tie it into what I'm always talking about, but there was a very influential Catholic German philosopher who lived, I think he was slightly younger than Tolkien, but he basically fled Germany when Hitler took power. Slightly after that, he just, because he was always, he was a philosopher. He wrote a lot of books on Thomas Aquinas. Anyways, so he was giving his not preaching, but giving his lectures basically on virtue, and then he fled to England during right before the Second World War. But I always thought to myself, like, there's no evidence that he actually met Tolkien, but there's some evidence that he met C.S. Lewis. So I mean, there's a lot of very interesting writers in that area, and he was a professor too, so God only knows, they could have met somewhere. But there's just so many ideas floating around this man, and so many different, like, besides Tolkien, you got C.S. Lewis, you got Yusuf Pieper. They're all in basically the same circle of people, and they wrote the most influential things that came out of that time period. If you ask me, Juice of Peeper, nobody really knows about them because the stuff didn't get translated from the German since I think it was like 1999 was the first time it got translated from the German into English. But anyway,
what did he write?
He wrote a lot of books, but the ones that I like the most, the Four Virtues. What is it? The Four Cardinal Virtues he wrote, which is a collection of his basically classes on the subject, and he also wrote another one which was much earlier than the Four Cardinal Virtues, which is Faith, Hope, and Love, which is much rougher. He does the three theological virtues as well, but he wrote a lot of different books. Death and Immortality. He wrote. There's also a primer on Thomas Aquinas that he wrote. Oh, I got a slew of them. But anyway, to me, you get these guys that are, I don't know, we'll say old world and coming into the new world of between World War I and World War II. It's just their writings are amazing.
I gotta read more. I gotta read more classic. I don't read much philosophy. It's funny because I got the urge to read Plato's Republic, and I was just about to order it, and my wife was just like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm gonna order Plato's Republic." She's like, "You got 2 copies upstairs." I'm like, "No, I don't." And she went and found me 2 copies upstairs. I was like, "So," it just shows you how well my books are organized. I could, So now I almost have 3 copies of a book that I'm probably never gonna read. But I heard that there's like a story that influenced Tolkien. That's why I want to read it, because there's a story of the Ring of Gyges in Plato's Republic, which is a magic ring that turns people invisible. And the guy uses the magic ring, and then he's a good person. And then once there's no consequences and people can't, he becomes an evil person, and he murders the guy in town and assaults his wife and steals all of his gold. And it's basically Plato saying, the average person is good because society is always watching them, but we will revert to evil if we could escape consequences. And it's a direct influence on the ring.
Which is funny because you think of it that way, and you think about the things that people do on the internet today because they're they're anonymous, right?
Yeah.
You would never who was it? I can't even remember who said it. It was some celebrity basically saying, people need to get punched in the mouth more, because if you said half of the things that you said on the internet directly to someone's face, they'd punch you in the mouth.
Right. There's a guy, I'm not going to repeat his name, but that's his stick, is he goes to people's houses and bothers them. So I forget what I said, and he goes, "Careful, because he does editing for somebody else." He goes, "I could do my job anywhere. I could be in your house." He goes, "I could be at your job in 48 hours. I was like, "Oh, come to LaGuardia, Terminal 3. When you get there, go all the way to the right." And then like every day, "I'm waiting. Are you going to come to my job?" Because I'm not one of these. "Come to my job. What do you think? You're going to start a fight? You're going to get arrested. Come on down. The Port Authority, you're going to play that game." I don't work at a nice, cushy office or something like that. So I just think it's funny. I called his bluff, and haven't heard from him since. RJ, John, do any of your characters go into outer space? If so, do you have a problem with making... Oh, I'm sorry. I keep thinking it's my channel. Making space physics work in stories.
I don't have any space physics in mind. We don't go into outer space in mind. But I was going to ask... Well, you asked that. You answer that question, and then I got a sort of token.
Issue 1 of Heroic Tales, the Patriarch flies to the edge of space to stop a meteor. And one of the things that he does is he takes a huge breath, and then he starts to get covered with frost. So yes, if space doesn't have space physics, then it's not space, and it's not dangerous. If it's not dangerous, it's not tense, and then there's no drama. And the funny thing that you should ask, because right now I'm writing a script set in space. It's about a spaceship. And it's me dealing with, like one of my big things is in Twitter. You always see this. How come they're always just turn off the warp drive and let the spaceship fly at warp 10 across space and conserve energy? And I always say, because that's not how warp drive works. You can't, warp drive enables you to go faster than light. Once you turn off warp drive, you slow down to sublight speeds. It supersedes natural physics. Natural physics, warp drive allows you to bypass natural physics. So I'm talking about that kind of stuff in my story. It's actually a comedy, and I'm sweating bullets because it's hard to write comedy.
So here's something I was thinking about. I don't know if anybody actually connected these two things together, but you were wearing your Cthulhu shirt last week when we were talking.
Right, now I'm wearing Remember Clandethal for Starship Troopers.
But so the exiling of Manwë into the exiling of sorry, what's the name into space? Morgoth into space. It reminds me of the basically what's it? The world of Cthulhu, where basically the elder god is dreaming up the entire existence of reality because he's floating off in space, and the rest of them are trying to keep him asleep. To me, that would be Morgoth out in space.
Yeah, like where is he? Because if you go to the edge of Valinor, there's the Gates of Night, which is just beyond. I can't think of the god of darkness and night and dreams, but there's the Gates of Night, and it's basically beyond that is outer space, and they chained him up and they threw him. And then I'm like, yeah, it's a fantasy world, but until I know otherwise, physics happens. So he's just hurtling away from Arda at the speed that Tulkas threw him. And since Tulkas is the embodiment of strength, he's probably going pretty quick. So this is the nerdy stuff that I think of. Here's a fantasy question. I think of all fantasy worlds have the same exact rules of physics as our world, unless told they don't.
Well, basically, that's the way writing's supposed to work.
Right. Yeah.
That's the editor in me, or having to deal with editors. If there is an exception to the rule of reality, you have to state it outright within your book in order for your audience to actually know what it is. Otherwise, you have to expect them to expect their suspension of disbelief to be normal world, except for what you put in.
Yeah, a lot of interesting questions. How ironic that you're working on a space-based book. Yeah, I'm working. It's like a Mad Magazine humorous story. There's going to be two stories in one. The elves that actually build the panels. So there's elves that are building the panels, and then there's the space story inside. And then one of the elves messes up, and the panels merge together, and there's a time warp. So I'm trying to make it consistent. So there's like time travel and space. I'm freaking out because I already found a couple of continuity errors. Yeah.
Alessandro says, I think the Lord of the Rings was inspired by the ring.
Yeah, that's one of the rings. There's a whole bunch of rings, and I think the rings of the Nibelung was inspired by that ring of Gadgies. You know, that was like the first magic ring story as far as I know. But then there was Aladdin's ring, the ring of the Nibelung. You know, there's a lot of magic ring stories.
I always thought it was more of a Norse mythology one, because there's a lot of magic rings within the Norse mythology. You go to
and all of them, when they put the magic rings on, they turned evil, right? It literally turned Fafnir into a dragon. Or am I misremembering that?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, John. I'm more thinking of the dwarves, because
the dwarf. He was a dragon. Fafnir was a dwarf that I think didn't let anybody have his treasure, and his greed turned him into a dragon. I don't know.
Because the funny thing is, again, you look at Tolkien's creation of the dwarves. That's basically the Viking mythology, because there's a lot of stories within the Viking mythology of dwarves basically being born out of stone and then being turned back into stone.
Yeah. So what do you think? You never played D&D, but you've been around D&D. I like beards, dwarven women with beards. I don't know. I guess these days it would make me whatever, but I like the idea that, like, you may have seen dwarven women. You didn't know it because they don't look any different than only the dwarves know the difference, kind of thing. I don't know. I kind of like that. That's an old D&D thing, that dwarven women had beards.
I never actually thought about that until the movies come out. It's not something, I don't know why, but it was not something I had thought about. Let me put it this way. I don't like to think about it that way, because if I ever see let's say, an attractive woman that has a for Halloween or something like that has a mustache or a beard drawn on. It's like, wow, you're ugly.
It's funny because I there's like in Patriarch number one, the first villain that you see is like a monstrous female, and I was telling Brian Bowen about her, and he was like, "Well, she's still got to be sexy," and I just playing devil's advocate because I agreed she's got to be sexy still. I was like, "Why?" He goes, "Because an ugly, monstrous woman nobody cares about. They all want her to be defeated. But if you have a sexy, monstrous woman, then there's some tension there, and that makes for a better story." He goes, "That's just human nature to care about beautiful women." And I was like, "Yeah, we are kind of mean, aren't we?" He goes, "Yeah, we're chauvinists. What do you want us to do?"
Just want to say hello to Sound Engraver.
Hey,
Great to have you here, Sound Engraver. The
speaking of
funny thing is, John, I was watching this thing just the other day because I watch a lot of art channels as well on YouTube. And one of the things is I fell down a rabbit hole and I have a lot of these bookmarked because of what I do and what you do. And when we're writing comics and trying to get descriptions for artists, there's a lot of art talk about what makes the human face, let's say, what makes the human face attractive and how there are different forms of the attractive human face and all these kind of things. And it also goes back into Buscema's, how to draw the Marvel way and all that kind of stuff. We use the least lines possible and all these kinds of things. One of the funny things that I ran across was you can always tell, well, I don't want to say always, but you can tell very botched plastic surgery, if not all plastic surgery. Why? Because the face contours don't look exactly correct as the way normal standards within our brains think of as beautiful. One of them being that little part below your nose that connects on your lip, between your lip and your nose. Whatever you call it, that little indent is usually gone when a woman has plastic surgery. And when you see a face like that, you automatically think there's something wrong with it, because a lot of people with, let's say, well, I do know that people born with, let's say, if their parents drank when they were being pregnant, right, and they fetal alcohol syndrome, they don't have that part of the face, right?
Really?
And there's things like that. Is like, so yeah. When I think there are some very specific parts of we recognize a human face to be attractive or not, and
Right.
to me, you put hair on any woman, and it's just nope. Sorry, no.
His thing, like Nicole Kidman. When I see her now, it's scary. Like, she doesn't look human. She looks like an alien. Like like all those conspiracy theories, the reptilians wear skin. She looks like an alien pretending to be human now, and she used to be so beautiful. And there's nothing wrong with getting old. Like, I look at Andy McDowell. To the best of my knowledge, she hasn't had any work done, and she looks older, and she's beautiful. Like, I would rather my wife age than get plastic surgery. It makes you look creepy. To be crude, like boob jobs. Oh God, just get them out of here. I don't want to see them. They don't look right. They don't move right. I'm an old fashioned man. I like the jiggle. I like the movement. You know what I mean? And now women are getting fake butts. It's like, knock it off. Anything rather than do a little bit of exercise, right? I mean, not everybody can eat 2 cheeseburgers and French fries and still lose weight.
Ironhide asked if you ever read the Goblin Reservation. I have never read it.
What is it? I never heard of it. I like your avatar. Why does nobody?
Take a guess says no one ever talks about Hobbit women. Why? Well, I'd say because they're just English women. That's all they are.
Well,
just short English women.
My wife loves Hobbit women, and we have Hobbit weekends every once in a while over at my house. We got a thing above the oven where to list all the meals, 11sies, onesies, lunch, supper, And once in a while, my wife would be like, "Man, things are getting rough. We're having a Hobbit weekend." I'm like, "Okay." I bought these big slippers, oversized slippers. They look like hairy feet, and we wear them. We wear our pajamas. We turn off our phones, and we just watch Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit all weekend, the extended editions, and we eat a lot of food. And the food we eat has to be food that hobbits would eat. So potatoes, meat. We're not getting jelly beans. Or maybe hobbits would eat jelly beans. I don't know. But you know what I mean? We're not going to get like, I don't know, Chinese.
Hobbit jelly beans are mushrooms.
Yeah, a lot of mushroom. My wife. So we'll do that. So yes, in this house we talk about hobbit women a lot. My theory is that female dwarfs wear false beards to hide. Oh, that's a good theory. They wear false beards.
George also says, "Oh, drow women." To me, the funny thing is, again, rereading Lord of the Rings, it makes me, because I used to read things like Dristward and all that kind of stuff, and I was like, "Oh, this is bad writing." But I can see now, after having reread Lord of the Rings, he's trying to copy Tolkien. Just he can't do it. The guy who did the original Dristward and Dark Elves for D&D.
Right. The thing about fantasy is every fantasy has to cope with Tolkien in some way. Either you're reacting to it or you're going along with it. Like to me, like the Game of Thrones is trying to be the anti-Tolkien. Like Elric is the anti-Conan. Maybe Conan escapes to Tolkien because that was published first. But like nowadays, you always react, and that's one of the things about Drow. I played D&D before I read Tolkien, so I love Drow elves. But I think they're from a misreading of the use of the word dark elves. In Tolkien, the high elves and the dark elves were two groups. The high elves were the elves that saw the light of the trees of Valinor, and the dark elves were all the other elves. They just didn't see the light. It's kind of like an elven put down. You're a dark elf. So when people are like, oh yeah, the elves were black, they were dark elves. It's like, no, they just didn't see the light of the trees. Like the one who actually created the sword that Turin, he was a dark elf. Eol, it was his name. He was a regular pale elf. It's just that he didn't see the trees. And they called Turgon. Somebody called Turgon a dark elf, and he's like, "Joke's on you. I saw the trees." But like Gandalf is a high elf, and as the ages go by, what's his name? Legolas is a dark elf because he never saw the trees. His father was a dark elf. But I think people who made the Drow elves, they're like, oh, dark elves. We're going to make dark elves now. But it works in D&D.
The one thing I was just thinking about, and there probably is an answer to this for someone who really, really knows Tolkien, but why he calls it Middle Earth. And I was just thinking the other day, I think it might have something to do with the fact that it's like Middle Ages, Middle Earth.
Well, it's
what I mean?
It's Midgard.
But I'm just saying. Well, yeah, but Midgard is, I suppose, because you're talking about the heaven, and I suppose so.
Yeah.
But because I was thinking of what you're talking about, the light of the trees and stuff like that, because basically the ancient world is the high ages, and then there's the Middle Ages, and we live in the low ages now. Which is because it's basically the use of Latin. So there was use of High Latin, and then there was the basically vernacular corrupted Latin of the Middle Ages. That's why it's called the Middle Ages. And now we don't barely use Latin at all. That's why we live in a low age. But it's more, instead of language, well, it's part language, but it's the light. You know what I'm talking about? Because you get less and less light into the world. You get the high age and then the Middle Earth, which is like the Middle Age or ages, and then it goes down from that, which we never get to see, which is us, basically.
Ironhide just says it's a sci-fi fantasy novel where the far future traditional fantasy folk creatures exist, as well as aliens and time travel. Earth is basically a universe. Well, that sounds interesting. The only fantasy that I've read that was written after Tolkien that is completely different is the Petal Throne. It's like completely different. And then I picked up Jack Vance, the Dying Earth series. It's supposed to be like what Gygax used for his magic systems in Dungeons and Dragons. I'm trying to expand my fantasy.
Tony says, who do I like better as a leader and a warrior, Aragorn or Conan? I'd say Aragorn. Conan is very much, we'll say, a barbarian turned into a leader, whereas Aragorn is a leader who tried to hide. Basically, he was born a leader. He was born a king. So there's a lot of difference there. But speaking of magic systems, I always go back to one of the things that's really sort of have a magic system in my world. Not really. It's not really magic. It's more a tie into powers, but things like that. I can't remember for the life of me the name. There was a really good manga, and it was turned into an anime where they have this incredible magic system, which I had never seen anywhere before, which is tied into the earth. And it was almost like it was a post-apocalyptic kind of thing. It was basically almost like Logan's Run, where the earth was sort of destroyed, but it got sections of it got preserved in these sort of outer space domes, and you could go from one to the other, and then there was a tie into the power of the earth that you could use through words. But I have to remember
Stardust with Sean Connery.
Kind of, yeah. Let's see. Jules says elf women are models, dwarf women are a joke, halfling women are children. That's why. But the real reason why is that there is no way to make jokes about hobbits.
Yeah, elf women are basically the aristocratics is the way I look at it, and dwarf women are like, you know, the artisan wives, you know, the builders and everything, and the hobbits are just the peasant women, you know, if you want to translate it.
George says that the writers of Dragonlance and Just Jordan have gone woke. I don't know about that, but that's unfortunate to hear.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And Sound of Graver says she remembers Martin's response to the name given him, the American Tolkien. I'm like, no, not even close. Yeah, not even close is right.
No, I find Game of Thrones to be hopeless. You know, I haven't read any yet, and I want to read it, but I'm not reading it until that guy finishes the books. That's my deal with you, George. Finish the books, and I'll read them. But I'm not reading a book written by an intern off of notes that were, you know, responses to how badly the TV shows were. I think, based on nothing, that the ending of the TV show was the ending of the books, and he saw how bad the reaction is, and now he doesn't know what to do.
John says he thinks the first Dark Elf was in the Silmarillion. I have not reread the Silmarillion yet. John would have to speak to that.
all the elves that never went to Valinor are Dark Elves. You know, all the Avari are Dark Elves. All the Cinder, all the Sylvan elves are Dark Elves. You know, anybody that didn't go to Valinor and come back, or stay. If you stayed in Valinor, you're definitely well. Are you a Dark Elf if you were born after the trees? Yeah, but you have to see the trees, Laurelin and Telperion. If you saw the light of the trees, then you're a high elf. So all the Noldor that came back, like Fëanor and Galadriel and Glorfindel, and so Elrond, he is a Dark Elf because he was born afterwards.
Fugly says, hot take, fantasy is to Lord of the Rings like Protestantism is to Catholicism. Love it or hate it, it has to be addressed. I suppose so. It's basically a referential system, then. That's what you're trying to say. Sound of Graver says, Gandalf is
Istari. That's the Istari is the name of the wizards. That's the name of their order. There's 5 Istari. Radagast, Saruman, Palandro, and Alahastar or something like that, and Gandalf. Those are the 5 wizards.
I lost my place in the comments. I was trying to go through them one by one.
And Rumiel, who wrote the Silmarillion, I heard an unconfirmed rumor that he is also considered a Istari, but he never went to Middle Earth, so he might be the 6th Istari, but he stayed in Valinor. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what I heard, and I don't remember where I heard it. I heard that the Drow were partially based on the Norse. Yeah, the Norse had dark elves. Yeah, if you read Norse mythology, like the elves and the dwarves are almost interchangeable with each other. You know, the elves were, and the dwarves fashioned all the magic items, which is why in the original D&D it always bothered me that dwarves couldn't be magicians when dwarves were always magical beings in all the stories. So when I played D&D, I threw out all of those race restrictions and level restrictions. You know, you could be a 30th level dwarf if you earned it, 30th level wizard dwarf. Why not?
What is the? Here's something that I don't remember, not even close, because the last time I picked up Cimmerillion was I don't even know that either. But there's gnomes and then there's dwarfs in Tolkien's world. What the heck is the difference?
Okay, gnomes are the names of the Noldor elves. So gnomes are elves. There was three groups of elves that woke up. There was the Finwë, and he became the leader of the Noldor. Elwë became the leader of the and I forget the other guy, but there were the three groups of elves, and then Finwë died, and his son, I forget, but his grandson was Fëanor, and so they were the Noldor elves that came back over the ice, Galadriel's people, and back into Middle Earth. They were the Noldor, and in the original rough draft, they were called the gnomes, and every once in a while they called them gnomes, but that's in Tolkien. So you could read the original drafts, and then Christopher Tolkien settled on just called them Noldor. Razvez says the first prominent dark elf, the Morquendi. Yeah, the Morquendi means dark elf. In the Silmarillion is Eol, the dark elf. He's the one that made the sword for Turin Tarambar, and then he's the one that I forget. He stole the white lady, had a kid. The kid went to Turgon, and or was it? I forget which king it was, and then he got thrown off the cliff. But he called him a dark elf because he lived in a dark forest where the light didn't penetrate. But yeah, he was called a dark elf. His son was a dark elf, but he ended up calling the king a dark elf, which was ironic because they took 3 ambassadors to Valinor to show them, hey, we're not bad. We're showing you a good place, because Morgoth, when the elves woke up, they lived in darkness in the stars, and they lived and they were like, yeah, there's this thing called light. It's beautiful and stuff like that. But Morgoth was going around stealing elves and turning them into orcs, and at the same time spreading rumors that the Valar were bringing them there to kill or to corrupt or whatever. So they didn't trust the gods when they showed up. So they elected one from the 3 tribes. They went there. Elwë was his name. He came back, became Turgon the Tall, married the Maya, whose name is escaping me, and eventually gave birth to Luthien, who through her line is Aragorn. But that Eol called him a dark elf too, and he was just like, I'm not a dark elf. I saw the light of the trees. But yeah, a Morquendi is like a trash talk term for elves that didn't see the light of the 2 trees.
That's one of the things that I think is very understated within Lord of the Rings. It's the role of light in the entire thing, which
Yes.
I picked up on in when they're coming down, when Sam and Frodo are coming down the hills before they even meet up with what's the names always elude me when I want them the most. Before they meet Gollum, there's a flash of lightning, and you hear a ring wraith scream, and then you also at one point, and you also hear Gollum scream, and Frodo goes blind and to me, it was all because of the flash of lightning. It was because light affects these creatures because they've all been touched by darkness in some way,
Right.
and it makes them it affects them in a negative way all the time. And that, again, when you get into the final battle around Gondor, is the fact that he pours darkness over the entire place because he wants the ring wraiths to actually have more power.
Right. In the world, there was originally 2 lamps that they created. Morgoth destroyed those, and they erupted and whatever. So the world was in darkness. The gods left. They went to Valinor, and they created the 2 trees. And one tree grew golden, one tree grew silver, and they pulsed. And that's all light came from there, except for the stars. And then the gods raised the mountains big. So Middle Earth, you're in darkness, and that was Morgoth's realm. So he thrived. That's in darkness. He made the orcs, the dragons, the werewolves, and all of the horrible things. And then when the Noldor elves came over, the humans arose, and the day the humans arose, the trees were destroyed. They took the last flower of Telperion, the last flower of Laurelin, and they made the sun and the moon. So that all light eventually came from these two trees. And then Fëanor, before the death of the tree, he captured the light in the Cimmerals. He made three elves. And when the lights perfectly blended, he captured the light in these jewels. He made it out of this super hard material. So these were the last lights from that tree, and that it was holy. And if you were evil, you would get burnt. So when Morgoth, when he put the crown, he had to put this thick crown so it wouldn't burn into him. And then, the werewolf bit the hand that held the Cimmeral, and it was burning from the insides, and it went nuts, and blah, 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 blah. And then when the sons of Fëanor captured they got burnt so bad, one of them jumped into the ocean, and the other one threw it and jumped into a lava pit because they couldn't escape this burning pain. But long story short, and then the last Cimmeral went into space and became a star. And that's what Galadriel, the light from that went into her pool, which is this pure water. She captured it in a vial and then gave it to Frodo. And this holy light, like the more you prayed, the more hope you had, the lighter it would, it did a lot more in the book. It turned off the magic guardians. It scared Shelob. It threatened Gollum with it. But yeah, you're right. All evil can't deal with light. And that's one of the things that Morgoth hated light, because he couldn't create it. And that's why he wanted the Cimmerals. He wanted power over the one thing he couldn't have power over, which was light. So he actually built this crown to show everybody, I'm the Lord of Light now. I'm the only person in Middle Earth that can literally generate light. So yes, light is always like, that's why Gandalf looked to the east on the third day and the crack of light came and all the orcs were terrified. And that's why Saruman and Sauron bred orcs with humans so they could tolerate light. The trolls turned to stone in light. So yeah, light is a big deal in Tolkien. Whenever you see light, it means hope, goodness.
Okay, so let's bring the conversation to a little bit more serious stuff that we talk about. But okay. So I don't know what this connection is. I really actually want to read something about it, but I don't know what the connection is, or if there even is one. So Tolkien is a very religious person.
Right.
And I know that in his letters, he talks about what we live in now is I think the seventh age in his mind of the world. Whereas I think it was the birth of Christ that began the seventh age. But I wonder what and how he would connect, if he ever even tried to connect the mythology that he creates to the religious ideas that he holds to, if at all, wherein, I know that there's a lot of, he doesn't like symbolism, but there's a lot of symbolism used, I think, and because the whole idea of grace, I think, is in the books themselves for Lord of the Rings. You get grace there, but you don't get any kind of religious, I don't say, I don't know how you'd even say it. We'll just say religion in general, but I don't know what the connection would be. Is there anything that would connect those two things of his writings?
I don't think I quite understand what you get. That, like, could you rephrase it a little bit?
So he says he's trying to say that this world that he writes of the Lord of the Rings and everything else, the Silmarillion, is a ancient history of our world today. They live on the earth, but he's also someone who believes that. So even in his sort of mythology, even though he doesn't put it in the books, put it in his letters, that Jesus Christ is the beginning of an age,
right? Beginning of the seventh age.
What is the connection between his mythology that he writes and the religion that he believes?
Oh, I don't think. Well, I think he tried to make it its own thing, but his religion was so ingrained to him that, like, unconsciously it seeped in. Like that whole line, like the whole line of Aragorn is really like the line of David, a savior is going to come.
That was the reading today, John, and I was thinking about that exact thing because I was reading through the appendices, and it's king after king after king, and the reading today for the the first reading for Mass is no, the gospel reading for Mass today is the line of going back from Abraham to David to Jesus. It's funny you should say that.
Yeah, and like you know, Morgoth is obviously Satan. Um, Saruman is like the false prophet. You know, and then like to me, the Lembas bread, that's communion. You know, the elves are like spiritual, almost like angels in a way, and then Galadriel, that's like a Lady of Guadalupe, Mother Mary kind of figure, and she makes this holy bread. And you know, Tolkien talks about how it not only like fills their body, but it nourishes their well being and their spirit. You know, I don't know if Tolkien meant that, but I think it was just so part of him. You know, and the whole story is the little common people changes the world. All the big people and stuff do stuff, but it's ultimately down to the little person. So, you know, I don't.
It's funny because I think of again, I don't understand um, his aversion to using simile and things like that, but to me, it's like the Pilgrim's Progress. You ever read the Pilgrim's Progress? It's basically a Protestant analogy of trying to basically be a good person and all this kind of stuff. To me, if someone said, "Is there a Catholic version of the Pilgrim's Progress?" I would say, "Yeah, it's Tolkien. It's Lord of the Rings." Because basically, the ring is a symbol of sin.
Yeah, it's the desire for power. You know. Yeah.
Which is funny because who asked? I don't know, it was Vaz or somebody up there. What do you think about the rings of power? I think that it is very telling that they focus on the rings of power and with this woke show because it's not supposed to be about power. That's the whole point of why everything gets corrupted and has to end because they focus on power.
Yeah, that whole creation of the Rings of Power would be a great story. And I think I made it through like half the first episode when I realized this is not Tolkien. This is fan fiction Tolkien, and I don't want to have anything to do with it. You know, they have what, the dwarven woman who sings the mountains into existence. Where is that in Tolkien? Then they have that Asian woman, and I remember saying to somebody, "Oh, what house is she from?" And their only response was racist. I'm like, you know, Tolkien described the three houses of the Edain, you know, as brown hair, black hair, blonde hair. You know what I mean? Like he described their features and what they should have. Nowhere does an Asian woman fit in the three houses of the Edain. You know, and then the the queen of Numenor is a black woman. Where did that come from? You know, they were basically Elrond's descendants, or Elros's descendants, who is Elrond's brother.
So, what the heck was I going to say? I keep on losing my train of thought.
I need to derail you. I'm sorry.
The Oh yeah, it was because this is basically the way I talked about this so much on my channel. The way that they view continuity, that's they don't want to actually read the original source material
Right.
on purpose because they think continuity is I've absorbed this from the culture and therefore just what I've absorbed from the culture is what I'm going to use as the basis for
Absolutely.
continuing the continuity.
What they want to do is don't read the books. We'll tell you what we want you to get out of the books. Oh, look, Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings now is about multiculturalism and stuff like that, you know, because that's what these progressives do is they steal all of the great material and they turn it into their stuff so that people think fondly of their stuff. You know, Star Wars, it's about multiculturalism and progressivism. And oh, what a coincidence. So is Tolkien now, and so is Narnia going to be, and so is Star Trek. And all they do is just kill it. You know, I'm getting sick of it. There's like, you know, I'm trying to think of like the only IP that I could still enjoy. I guess they didn't touch Conan yet. They didn't touch the Lensman yet. You know, what else is there?
They tried to with the new Red Sonja movie, but yeah, since that flopped hard, I don't think they're going to try to go after Conan anytime in the near future, which is good.
Yeah, like the Noldor had black hair, the elves, and the Sylvian elves had blonde hair, and the I forget, the sea elves had golden hair, hair. And the humans, they had black hair, brown hair, and blonde hair. And then every once in a while, a redhead would pop up.
Which makes sense why after Sam takes the last of the dust and just allows it to go into the air in Hobbiton at the end of the book, there's suddenly a whole bunch of golden-haired children born, and it becomes a trait within the hobbits.
Right. I love that when they kind of showed it in the movie, but they didn't give it enough. Maybe it's in the extended edition. I forget. But when he takes the ring, he immediately gets tempted, and the first thing he sees in his mind is him leading a great army and overthrowing Barad-dûr. And Samwise immediately dismisses that, and then the ring switches tactics, and all of Morgoth is turned into a great garden of flowering flowers and gigantic pumpkins, and that tempts him for a second. I just love that. His temptation was to become the greatest gardener and turn all of hell into the world's greatest garden. That's why Samwise is my favorite.
Being someone who lives pretty close to nature and tries to struggle to get his garden to actually produce every year, that scene really actually touched my heart.
I'm looking at the comments. Yeah, I can't wait for Amazon and Netflix to try their hand at Conan the Barbarian. Yeah. Instead of like to see your enemies driven before, to see Trump driven before you, and to hear the lamentations of the MAGA. That's what it's going to be. The Netflix Conan. I read Lovecraft's The Alchemist. Yeah, that's a pretty creepy story. I give Lovecraft a chance. I don't recall the first thing I tried from which put me. Yeah, I could see that. Lovecraft is tough. Lovecraft. I think Lovecraft is tougher than Shakespeare. Because I think Lovecraft, I don't know, maybe he had an inferiority complex, or he made everything overly complicated. Where Shakespeare was trying to. Did you lose me? Did you lose me? We think of Shakespeare as so highfalutin, but really Shakespeare was like, right? Did I fade out?
Yeah, you faded out for a second.
I said Shakespeare was performing to the lowest of the low. You know what I mean? Nowadays we think Shakespeare is highfalutin, but it was bottom barrel fart humor. It just shows you how we have diminished as a society. That lowbrow entertainment used to be Shakespeare.
So the one thing that I really appreciate the Peter Jackson movies for, and it does connect to the whole fact that they're trying to make a woke Lord of the Rings, because it's not that far-fetched to make a woke Lord of the Rings, because you remember back in the 70s and 80s, there's a lot of hippies that were into Tolkien. They were trying to just make it into a hippie commune kind of thing. And to me, I just like when they came out with the Lord of the Rings movies, like, thank heavens they're actually doing this justice instead of this hippie crap that you got people with trying to make Tolkien, because they were trying to do that in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. Not that I remember the 60s, but I remember the 70s and the 80s, them trying to do that over and over again.
Yeah, you remember Leonard Nimoy had that song, Frodo.
Oh, yeah, he did an entire album.
Yeah, greatest hobbit the world has ever known, And then
that was actually one of there was about 3 or 4 LPs in my local comic shop when I was a kid, and that was one of them.
Yeah, the hippies used to write Frodo lives graffiti everywhere. I remember that. Yeah, they were all into the Lord of the Rings. Shakespeare was vulgar and common. Yeah.
Ironhide says, I mean the same thing with Lovecraft, Howard, Chandler, Hammett, etc. Pulps were considered sleazy, lowbrow entertainment, and now we rightfully see these guys as master of the written word.
Absolutely, yes. Good comment. Yeah, the pulps, especially those detective pulps, those were like what lowbrow common plumbers and electricians read, and now nobody even reads anymore. You know what I mean? It's funny, like what they say, in 100 years we went from teaching English and Latin in high school to teaching remedial English in college. Education is a joke.
It's funny. Someone was asking me yesterday, why does nobody use the word or nobody use the name Ulysses anymore? And I was saying, well, it's because back before we had pulps, what you had was basically the first translations of ancient Roman and Greek stuff into English, and that would be um, Virgil, and that would be translated from the Latin, and they would use the name Ulysses, and that's why it became such a common name because everybody read the Aeneid
Right.
or the Odyssey and the Iliad and things like that. This is what they had before we got pulps, and then you had because I know for like Howard. I always look at Howard and I know that he's so influenced by, let's say, Edith Hamilton's Irish mythology, because I read that as a kid and I can see that he read it as a kid because it was probably new when he was a kid. But these are you, you see these pulp writers, they're working off of intense mythology that had just come into the English language for the everyday person.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that comment. You made my day. That's something I'm going to be thinking about all day tomorrow. I'm trying to remember. Ironhide, thank you. It's true. The average coal worker at the end of the day, covered in dirt, would sit down and read a detective pulp. That today people would be like, "That's too hard to read. You got anything easier to read?" You know. Yeah. It is. It is. I mean, look at comic books. I look at these creepy and eerie's. Like these, the masterful drawings by master draftsmen in the background, and they churned them out every month. And now I'm looking at like modern marvels, and I'm like, look at this art. Like standards are just falling. It really is embarrassing.
Again, I don't know if I said this last week. Just anybody who missed it, we did a 4-hour live stream last week on John's channel.
Well, speaking of which, I got to get going soon. I got to be in bed at 10 o'clock. I'm back at the 4 o'clock.
Okay. So what was I just going to say? Well, we'll leave it at that then. Since John has to take off, we'll leave the discussion at that. And next week we will be on John's channel. We're going to try to simulcast it on this channel as well. But if it doesn't come up for you, go on over to John's channel and we'll both be on there for Comic Book Team Up.
Yeah, we go back and forth, but sometimes you could share streams. So that's what ultimately we want to do. So we'll be on each other's stream. So we'll try next week. I we'll see if there's a way we could simulcast on both streams.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there and just let everybody know the links for both John's book, which is done, and mine, which is getting done, are in the description. And we watch the trailers at the first for anybody who comes later to watch. Besides that, we're just going to say goodbye, and we'll see you next week. And I'll see anybody on Saturday for my Saturday video. Okay.
Bye-bye, everybody.
See you later.